There is a war going on, a spiritual war, a war between truth and deception. Only one thing cuts through all the lies and opinions of man. It's the truth of an ancient book. It is God's word. It is God's sword.
We're in Exodus chapter 1 this morning. This Lord's Day, Exodus chapter 1. I know I have mentioned to you that you should all take the time to watch Patterns of Evidence, Exodus. Patterns of Exodus, Patterns of Evidence, Exodus. You should, and I hope you all have. It's available on your streaming service. It's not expensive. Many of you have. You should. And they make the case, the basic thesis of the documentary, award-winning documentary, is that for the last half century or more, scholarship, so-called scholarship, has denied all of the evidence that the Exodus ever happened. In fact, they contend that there is no evidence at all whatsoever that the children of Israel were ever in Egypt or that they ever left. You'd think the numbers that are recorded for us in the Scripture might have a mass of people so great that they would make a mark on the place where they lived. And then sudden departure, the plagues, and all that took place in Egypt. Again, the so-called archaeological community has been committed to the narrative that there is no evidence that Exodus ever happened, and it doesn't matter, they say. Even Israeli archaeologists, even rabbis coming out saying it doesn't matter that the Exodus never happened. What matters is the moral of the story. That's all that matters. As if all of the centuries, indeed all of the millenniums, of the Jews practicing Passover, remembering the Exodus, was all based on a fairy tale. Utter foolishness. Now the issue is this, and they make the case that the whole issue comes right down to the timeline, that current archaeology, they're like a club, and they're just plain committed. They are committed to one particular pharaoh, committed to one particular period of time that it was supposed to have happened. They say it didn't happen, but they're committed to one time that it had to happen. But it didn't. If they were to adjust their chronology just 2 centuries, the evidence is overwhelming. It all comes right down to the use of the term Ramses here in this first chapter. We'll read in the 11th verse that they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Well, it's the use of Ramses. That's it. That's all they got. Outrageous. And they say Ramses, therefore, had to be the king. Well, when Ramses was Pharaoh of Egypt, there was already archaeological evidence that Israel was already a nation, not slaves in the land of Goshen. They were already a nation that Ramses boasts of having some victories over. It's absolutely foolish. It comes right down to this. The ruins of the city of Ramses, which does exist, has been excavated. But guess what's under Ramses? The city of Ramses has another city under it, and that is older. That is Avaris. And Avaris has all the evidence, overwhelming evidence, not only evidence of a Semitic people that lived there, all of the evidence of first the prosperity of these people, then the utter poverty of these people, including the death of all their babies, mostly male babies 3 months old, buried in the excavations. The excavations in Avaris actually has a palace, non-Egyptian palace, built by the Egyptians to honor someone who in his tomb, which happens to be one of 12, that should be significant to you, 12 patriarchs. There are 12 tombs in Avaris, 12 great and significant tombs near a palace. The palace itself has 12 pillars on either side of its portico. Inside the tomb, the big tomb, which is a small pyramid, inside that small pyramid is a monument, the remains of a monument to a non-Egyptian who has hair that is distinctly Semitic, whose pigment on the monument is yellow skin, which is how the Egyptians represented everyone non-Egyptian. And he has a coat of many colors. You really got to see that documentary. Coat of many colors and a weapon on his shoulder that is the weapon of a shepherd. You remember, of course, that Moses wrote that it was significant that they, the people of Israel, were shepherds, and that they needed to stress that when they meet Pharaoh, because that will be key to them remaining separate, a separate people not assimilated into Egypt, because the Egyptians consider it loathsome to tend animals. And so these people who tend animals, they're shepherds, they're cattle farmers, they have donkeys and camels. They were kept distinctly different, separate as a culture and as a society from the Egyptians. All of that, it's overwhelming. You really got to watch that documentary if you haven't already. You haven't done your homework. The book Exodus, the name, it's a Greek term. It's what the Greek Septuagint referred to the book as. The Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures called it the Exodus. The Exodus means departure, and it is what the Hebrews call the book of departure. It is written by Moses. It's understood to be written by Moses, and you can tell by the first word in chapter 1, verse 1, now these are the names, that this is intended to be a continuation of what he wrote in the first book, Genesis. So let's read. Chapter 1, verse 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin. Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls. For Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruit. Look at verse 7. This is a strong statement. It's almost what you might look at as redundant. The children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. This is a book that doesn't exaggerate. And Moses, writing, is stressing the massive population explosion that they, as a people, experienced under the blessing of God. May I just say, at the same time, the blessing of God was also the guidance of God, who commanded that the symbol of their covenant with him would be circumcision. It would be the cutting away of the foreskin of the male. You have to acknowledge, number one, Israel is not the only circumcised culture, but it does play a part. There's no question that they, the Israelites, were spared so much of the microbial infections that affected the health of women and birth rates in pagan cultures. Cleanliness was an issue, was a factor. Nevertheless, it was the blessing of God, because it's going to happen even despite all kinds of adversity. So you see verse 7 again, how strong the statement is. They were fruitful. As if that's not enough. They increased abundantly and multiplied. If that's not enough, they waxed exceeding mighty, and if that wasn't enough, the land was filled with them. And that's Moses going, you get my point? They were making babies like crazy. And by the time they leave, they come into Israel. They come to Egypt. As Israel, they come in 70 people. They leave somewhere between 2 and 3 million people 4 centuries later. Verse 8, now there rose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. A new king. He doesn't know Joseph. He has no regard for the man that his predecessors honored. No regard for the man that God used to save everybody's life. No regard at all. He doesn't know Joseph. And that's going to affect everything he does. Because he does not know Joseph, he has no sense of gratitude for how God used him. And the significance that Joseph played to this new king even having a kingdom or having a life. Much the same way, there's a whole new generation that does not know America's founders. They don't know Washington. They don't know Lincoln. There's a whole generation that have no sense of gratitude or no depth of appreciation for the wisdom of those who founded this nation, somehow or another. By 1962, after a couple hundred years of the Bible being central in our educational system, 9 members, 9 unelected officials, the Supreme Court under Chief Justice Warren, determined that the Bible was unconstitutional, even though the guys who wrote the Constitution taught the Bible in their schools. But it's that way. A whole new generation comes that don't know. Verse 9, and he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass, when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. There's a new Pharaoh that wants to create a crisis that doesn't exist. Does that sound familiar? In the words of that false prophet, that false Jewish prophet, Rahm Emanuel, former chief of staff for President Barack Obama, never waste a crisis. The crisis may be real, it may only be perceived. Israel had done nothing. There's no record that they had done anything to be a threat to their neighbors, the Egyptians. But you have a king who now wants to create the perception that they are a threat and to get everybody scared of a potential, something that has not happened, a potential. You understand, fear is a tool that is used by tyrants to get you afraid, to make you afraid in order that you will gladly surrender your freedom, your sovereignty as a person. They want to make you afraid, then they want to fuel that fear every way they can. And they have media working for them. And they'll throw up lying numbers of how many people are going to die and of how many people have died. They had preposition problems. Remember that back in the COVID tyranny? Preposition problems. They could make no distinction between somebody dying with COVID versus somebody dying from COVID. Because they needed those numbers. Incentives were given to our medical institutions. Financial incentives were given to them to record things in such a way that the numbers were skewed. We were all being lied to. We at Calvary Chapel, all of us being threatened, all of us being accused of being super spreaders. We lost no one. Take note. We lost no one. There were people that had it harder than others. There were people that had a flu so bad they nearly died, partly because of the ventilator they were put on. But that's another whole story, right? Let's not go all political this morning. Tyrants do such things as they stoke fear, because fear can get translated into power. There's a king that came to Egypt. Now, which king are we talking about? I think they make a compelling case that it was not in what is the Egyptologists refer to as the New Kingdom. It was in the Middle Kingdom, 2 centuries before Ramses. Amenhotep the second, most likely, being the Pharaoh that Moses had to deal with. But the Pharaoh that Moses had to deal with was first this Pharaoh that stoked the fears and that turned the people of Egypt cruel. Verse 11 says, therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. You see the verb? They set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. They deliberately became cruel to these people. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Ramses is what the place is known as. Later in history, Ramses is built over Avaris. Verse 12. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Do you understand that term? They were troubled. They were in dread, an illegitimate dread. I say to you again, it was an illegitimate fear, not a legitimate fear. These people actually believe that God has made promises to them that involves the promised land, the land of Canaan, north. And these are people who do believe in freedom. But they are no threat. But their population growth has got the Egyptians freaked out. They were grieved. Verse 13, the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, hardship, or hardness. To serve with great harshness. Let's talk about rigor versus meaningful work. I continue to urge all of you to get a copy of The Book That Made Your World by Vishal Mangalwadi and read it. Get a copy of Vishal Mangalwadi's book. He makes a case in one of his early chapters of the distinction around the world and all through history. There's a distinction between work, which can be quite pleasurable and rewarding, versus toil. Now, all of us in this room know the difference between those two because we've all found hopefully something that we like to do or something we hope we're going to get to do. We've also all done things that we had to do. It took no real pleasure in it. We all know what it's like to have a job that we hope is not a career. Initially you just got to get a job. You need a job. You got to eat. You got to pay your bills. You got to pay your rent. You got to have a job. But then, not long into that job, first you're excited. I got this job. I got a job. I'll start tomorrow. Seasons later, you're like, well, I've got to get out of this job. It's not gratifying, not fulfilling. But you know what it's like, and I hope you do, to find something that you truly do enjoy, or you don't mind doing it much, but the reward is so much that you are glad to do it. That you're able to step back and look at your work and go, man, yeah, I did that. It's gratifying. These stained glass windows up here, I got some serious gratification out of that project. And I find myself just standing around looking at them, sitting down here in an empty room and looking at them going, yeah. Especially the alterations to this one. Because what you don't know is that there was originally, right there where the open Bible is, there was a Bible there, but on top of it was a Masonic symbol with a compass and a square and a G in the middle. Well, that had to go. But you didn't know that because it was covered up. The other Christians from the church where it came, they had made a thing and covered it. It was kind of opaque. They did their best to paint it and make it the same shape, and they hung it on fishing line right in front of that to obscure that, ridiculous pagan symbol. And if you happen to be a Mason, I hope you're offended. You want to talk about it. Let's talk. So I went to work. Eric Meyerson, my faithful assistant, very helpful guy, Said, don't do it, you're going to destroy it. No, we need to get a stained glass guy. We need a professional. We need to spend some money. I said, we'll go ahead and look into it. He looked into it, and it would be months waiting if we could even get somebody. Despite his nail biting, I went at it with a hunting knife. Hunting knife, hot glue gun, glass paint, and ta-da! Including the removal of that golden chalice that was up in that little circle where there is now that Calvary dove. But I got to tell you, that was really gratifying. It's really, truly gratifying, too, to hear somebody go, man, you were so right. I mean, somebody to go, you are so right. I can't believe, can you believe I was saying we got to spend a bunch of money on that? Silly me. Very gratifying. But there are things you do and you build or you make or you produce. And it's so very rewarding. Or if it's not, the work may be something you don't mind, but what you really enjoy is how well it pays. It rewards. It's rewarding. Even if you're not necessarily proud of the product or something like that, but you get paid so well. You go, man, I don't mind doing this at all. But rigor, toil, there's no reward, especially as a slave. There is no reward. That is the danger that we find ourselves in as a free country, a danger that our founders looked ahead and warned us about. That when more people realize they can do nothing and be rewarded, and fewer people are actually working, and more people realize that the more they work, the more they're punished for doing it, punished in taxes, then the system begins to really fall apart. It becomes rigor when you labor and someone else takes it. And they take it to go use it to buy votes, to get more power. And they fund things that grieve you, break your heart. You start finding yourselves thinking in terms of taxation without representation. Rigor. They made their lives bitter, verse 14 says. They made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service when they made them serve was with rigor. Perspective is everything, right? Perspective matters. One man can find working with bricks to be quite gratifying. He could build something. Like our own John Veyu, who went to work on the pizza oven, which is like one of the masterpieces of his life, a center of fellowship. It's a thing of beauty. Some of you don't even know. You've never gone out that door and taken a left. You come from the parking lot to your seat, back from your seat back to the parking lot. There's a beautiful place that we've created just outside there. The artful work of a master landscaper like Matt Cronin, who did this thing as an offering unto God from his skill. And he just landscaped this beautiful fellowship area. I had an idea. Man, he had an actual vision. John Veyu, so you imagine John working on bricks. He's out there just bricking together stone and bricks to make a pizza oven. Oh, that thing produces some wonderful pizza. And it's the center of fellowship, quality time. In our evening services, Wednesday night, Sunday night, you got to visit sometime. Visit your church on a Wednesday night or Sunday night, the place that you visit on Sunday morning. Perspective is everything. So you come by one guy, he's out there working, you go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm just mixing mud, I'm mixing mortar. Yeah, what are you doing? I'm just carrying bricks. You say, hey, John, what are you doing? He'd be like, I'm building a masterpiece. I'm building a gift to God. Or somebody else might go, I'm building a cathedral. Perspective is everything, and it affects how you see what it is that you do. Children of Israel, all they know is they got no reward, and they're making it hard for them. Verse 15 says, the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other, Puah. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools. If it be a son, then you shall kill him. And if it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not, as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. The king of Egypt called the midwives. He called for the midwives and said to them, Why have you done this thing, and have saved the men children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and are delivered ere the midwives come unto them. The midwives, plural. Understand, the names of these two ladies should not be understood as the names of the two midwives for a nation, a people of more than 1 million, more than 2 million. But rather, these are probably ladies that lead a union, an association, or a guild. They exercise leadership, and they refuse to obey the king. Now, what they give the king of Egypt for an answer is, these Hebrew women, they're lively women, and, those children are born by the time we get there. Well, it may be a lie, and some have a problem with that, because, wait, you bore false witness, and yet they're commended by God? I don't have a problem with that. You're hiding Jews, as Corrie ten Boom's family did, in your house, and the Nazis come banging on your door. I believe it is the will of God for you to lie and lie well. But others have a hang-up with it, whether or not they lied, and so it may not be a lie. It may well be the Hebrew women were lively, and they were spitting out those babies, but that most likely the midwives were encouraged to drag their feet getting there by their leaders. So understand this. They gave an answer. Look at verse 20. Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass because of the midwives, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. He established their house. That they, the midwives, were also fruitful. God blessed them for their disobedience to the king. Now, I had a whole lot of people, a lot of ministers, back in 2020 in the spring of the COVID tyranny, making me aware of Romans chapter 13 and the call from the scripture that we obey the government, as if I didn't know that. My contention then to them was Romans 13 also applies to our governor, that she is supposed to obey the law. And she was being lawless. She may try it again, and you guys all need to know that this particular church, at least this particular pastor, will continue to engage in civil disobedience if I'm put in a position where I must choose to obey God or the government. If I can obey the government and God at the same time, I have every intention of doing that, and will encourage you to do likewise. But when it comes to the government telling me to do something that Christ has told me not to do, or the government telling me not to do something that Christ, my King, has told me to do, it's a simple choice. Even as it was for the apostles in the 4th chapter of the book of Acts, when they told their government, whether we should obey you or God, you'll have to judge that one. But as for us, we must testify to what we have seen. It's kind of messed up that a government official would presume to declare that there are certain things that are non-essential and other things are. That abortion clinics are essential. That pot shops are essential. Walmart's essential. Church gathering non-essential. What in the world kind of bigotry is that? There is no science to it. Tell me they're going to follow the science. Well, they were lying. Just thought I'd take advantage of this opportunity to tell you once again that if the edict comes again, if the mandate, because this is not a nation that was designed to operate off of edicts and mandates, but if we get new mandates, they will be defied as well. I only wish that we had succeeded in getting our case to the Supreme Court like other states did, and each of those states had a ruling in their favor, and their tyrant governor was reproved. We only did not because we're up here in the Northeast under the tyranny of the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and they just kept running out the clock and ignoring, sending it back to U.S. District Court and doing all they could to stall, to delay the game, to run out the clock, and that's what they did. So if there's a next time, just know we are ready. I am ready. These two midwives, who probably led the Association of Midwives, were commended because they feared God. They feared God. Can you imagine? I want you to think about this for a second. Can you imagine their refusal to murder little babies and somebody saying to them, hey, it's the law of the land. You got to obey the law. Let every soul be subject to the higher power. Can you imagine somebody saying that to them? You're obligated. You got to obey the law. What can you do? Hey, God let this king come into power. God put him there, so you're obligated to just obey. That's the will of God. They would not have been commended. They were commended for their refusal to obey. Verse 22, Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. There went a man of the house of Levi who took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And she could no longer hide him. She took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch. And she put the child therein. She laid it in the flags by the river's brink. She put it in the weeds. She technically obeyed the edict. She put her baby boy in the river in a lifeboat in the weeds where the current wouldn't take it. Now, you know there are crocodiles in the Nile River. Imagine the torment of her soul. Imagine. But going to work as she did, coating a basket with asphalt and pitch, coating it, sealing it, making it watertight, and it has a lid. Imagine the love with which she did all of that. The last time the word ark was used was in Genesis, and it was Noah's giant floating barge. Now it's just a little lifeboat, all sealed up. It's watertight. She puts it in the river. She does, in fact, technically obey the law, the edict. Verse 4 says, and her sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. So mother couldn't stay by and didn't. Can you imagine the heart of a mother? Put yourself there, ladies. I'm going to put your baby in a basket in a river with crocodiles. Well, the government wants that child dead. She couldn't stand around and watch. But her daughter, Miriam, she does. Moses' sister, she sticks around to see what would be done in verse 5. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along the river's bank, and when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maidens to fetch it, her maid. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. That's a clever girl right there. Kids in the river. That's one of the Hebrews' children. That light-skinned kid in the basket. Says she had compassion when she heard that baby weeping. Surely you can all understand that, can't you? Something about the cry of a child just tears your heart out. Especially an infant cry. Of course, there's different cries from your children. You get to know them well. You get to know, every mother gets to know the voice print of a bratty cry and tune it out and ignore it. And then there's a hurt cry that mothers will break through walls to get to the child. There's different cries. Tearless, fake crying. A child trying to get their way. But doesn't it reach in a helpless little one crying, doesn't it reach right in to your soul? It did for Pharaoh's daughter. Well, it says here, verse 7 of them, his sister, then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? Man, Miriam played a significant role. Now, of course, later on in life, Miriam's going to have a notion that Moses is taking too much power. After all, she had a very significant role in saving him. She'll get dealt with way later, but file that one away and remember that for now. That was a good day. She's having a good day. She's like, so you want me to go get a wet nurse? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called for the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. She got paid to do it. Still, there's such a mix. Don't you imagine a great mix in her heart of gladness that this child will live, but sadness that she has to nurse this child and then wean this child and give this child. Man, verse 10 says, the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She called his name Moshe. That's Moses. She called his name Moses, and she said, because I drew him out of the water. So Pharaoh's daughter gave the child the name. Says, child, I don't know what name he went by before that, if his father even, you notice his father's not even mentioned in saving the child's life. Mother, she's the one who went through all of this. She's key to the story. This little boy, Moshe, his name means drawn out. Now, can you try to imagine the day that she had to bring this toddler and deliver this toddler to Pharaoh's daughter? I witnessed an event now 17 years ago, one of the heaviest, most powerful things I ever witnessed. When a young birth mother took a piece of her soul and held it out with her arms to an older mother with the words, this is your baby. And that older mother embracing that piece of that girl's soul and took it into her soul. It was heavy, scary heavy. Heavy, one of the heaviest things I've ever witnessed in my life. And there were tears in both of their eyes. And, you know, it was a little guy, a little bitty boy who came into the world in a less than ideal way to a single mom. She made a decision, a very prayerful decision. She was counseled and advised when she made the decision that adoption was what was going to happen. Beautiful thing, amazing thing. We were ambushed, shanghaied in a sense. We had no idea. We were empty nest, and bang, we were being asked. Boy, what a wonderful gift of God that little dude was. Turned into a big man. God has a plan for his life, profound plan. I've always been amazed by it, witnessing it as I have. And it is a reality. God was in that kid's story. And you can't say God planned for, or that God made conception happen in a situation that was outside of marriage and everything right. A married man was involved, teenage girl, 18 at the time, 19 when she gave this child to us. It was heavy, intense. I think of that when I think of this exchange between these two women, this mother handing her baby to this other mother, to the princess of Egypt. Powerful, heavy stuff, you guys. Heavy. By the way, the day that it happened, the day that I made the presentation, because we kept it real secret, the day I made the presentation, nobody knew this baby was coming except for those closest to me. And I came out that day, did a baby dedication. This baby is ours. Everybody applauded, except for one lady sitting in this church went out loud, I hope the girl wasn't coerced. Shook her head, and said that out loud in that holy moment. Fortunately for me, I didn't hear it. It was related to me after. Can you imagine? That's the kind of people we are. We'd coerce a young woman into giving up her child. One of the most offensive things I ever heard in my life. There was coercion involved, and we were coerced. I'm glad to be so coerced. Can't imagine life without Ben. Hand of God is on him. The hand of God is involved in his life, and the hand of God is on every life. You are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus unto good works which God before ordained you should walk in them. Ephesians 2:10. You should know that lady doesn't go here. In fact, the cool thing is, I don't even remember her name or who she was. But the quote never left. Never forgot that quote. Couldn't tell you who it was. And it's good that I don't remember. The story is going to make a leap from his being a toddler and he's handed over to his mother, a massive leap. Verse 11 says, and when it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren and looked on their burdens, he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he knows he is a Hebrew when he's 40. Remember last week as we went through this, because Stephen gave a history lesson in Acts chapter 7. That history lesson, he said Moses was trained and schooled in all of the knowledge and all of the science of Egypt, and that he was mighty in word and in deed. The guy could speak, he was smart and he could speak, and he was mighty in deeds. Among those deeds, according to the historian Josephus, Flavius Josephus says that Moses also generaled Egypt's army into victory over the Ethiopians in a war. So Moses had some achievements. But verse 11 just leaps all the way up to his 40th year. So he comes to visit his brothers, the children of Israel, in Hebrew, and he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. Verse 12 says he looked this way and that way, and when he saw there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. No shortage of sand to hide a guy in there in Egypt. You ever see your dog do that? Or a cat? It's a very considerate animal. We'll take the time to try to kick a couple, at least a little dirt on top of that what they're leaving behind. I picture it with Moses. that Egyptian, he smoked. He had zeal. And he saw what was being done. And how did he smite the guy? Did he use his fist? Did he use a club? Did he use a blade? Details not given. But he hit him in the sand. Verse 13. When he went out the second day, now that doesn't mean the very next day, but his second visit. Next time he comes, behold, two men of the Hebrews strove together, and he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? Why are you doing that? And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedst the Egyptian? Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. Surely you guys have all seen the old movie. Was it Edward G. Robinson who always played a villain? And they had him playing Dathan. Come on, you guys. Cecil B. DeMille's big production. You've seen it, haven't you? Am I looking at an uneducated, completely uneducated audience? Surely you guys have seen that. And they worked him into the story. Dathan, he's a wicked man. You keep waiting for him to get it, and he finally gets it. Who the guy was, we don't know. But remember what Stephen told us in Acts chapter 6. Moses actually believed that because he can see it, surely they, his people, will see it. He is their hero. He expects them to thank him for coming. And instead of thanking him, he is thrust away. Go, get out of here. Who made you king? Who made you ruler or judge over us? You gonna kill me? Are you gonna kill me as you would kill the Egyptian? Eh? You can picture that kind of a punk, that kind of bad guy. So when he realizes, verse 15, now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. He sat down by a well. Land of Midian, okay? It's the land of Midian. It's not like there's a nation of what you'd call Midian. There are people who live in the land of Midian, and they're Midianites. But this is the region that today is Saudi Arabia, including parts of the Sinai Peninsula. Moses ends up in the land of Midian. Look at what it says here. He said, verse 16 says, now the priest of Midian. The priest of Midian. Well, let me just throw out to you that the most likely explanation is found in Genesis chapter 25. In the list of sons that Abraham also had beside Isaac, he had a second marriage to Keturah, confusing Moses' wife Zipporah, blended them there for a second. And Keturah bare unto him a list of sons, including one Midian. That Midian is probably best understood then as a son of Abraham, a descendant. The name is significant. And then that would make this a priesthood that is relevant, a priesthood that is actually Abrahamic, connected to Abraham. Therefore, a priest of the true God, Yahweh. Well, the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, those bullies. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered the flock. Man, I love that scene where in Cecil B. DeMille's big production, Charlton Heston springs into action with a staff. Surely you've all seen that. So he came, and he helped them. He was their hero. He wasn't a hero to his own people, but he was received as a hero that day. He's not out of the hero business just because his own people rejected him. And he's at a low point. You know what? Listen, the old Puritan commentator, John Trapp, writes about Moses 40 years out here in the land of Midian, out in that desert, as being more of an education than the first 40 years were in all the schools of Egypt, and all the science, and all the culture and language, everything else. That the 40 years out there, he learned more, and he amassed more knowledge in that 40-year period, which began, as we're reading here. When they came, verse 18, when they came to Ruel, their father. Now you read that and you go, Ruel, wait a minute, I thought their father's name was Jethro, because that's what we'll see in chapter 3. We'll see it also for the rest of Exodus, and he referenced to Moses' father-in-law, he is Jethro. So how do you solve that one? Well, surely there are a number of people in this room known by a couple different names. And such was the case, no doubt, with Ruel, and either Ruel or Jethro is actually a title given to him because he's priest. It's in that role. But they're one and the same. When they came to Ruel, their father, verse 18 says, he said, how is it that you are come so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. An Egyptian, because that's how Moses appeared to them when he arrived. Moses did not have his long flowing white hair in the movie when he got there. He grew it while he was there in the movie. But he arrives looking very Egyptian. He fled, he's a fugitive, but he's a fugitive Egyptian. Everything about him, his hair, his beard, whatever else was to them Egyptian. That's what they saw when he came. he said to his daughters, verse 20, "Where is he? Why is it that you left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter. She bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, "I've been a stranger in a strange land." Remember how Joseph had those two sons down in Egypt? And he named them Manasseh and Ephraim, forgetful and fruitful. Moses now, similarly, he has a son. He's got a new life. And he names his son Gershom, which is stranger. He names him stranger because he's been a stranger in a strange land, a foreign land. Verse 23, it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up to God by reason of the bondage. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Now just read the first verse of chapter 3, and that's where we'll stop. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. That's an interesting concept. I like the English translation here. He came to the backside of the desert. That the desert's got a backside. Where do you live? You live in the backside of your town? You live in the backside of the state? How do we determine front and back? What's really interesting to me is that out in the backside of the desert, which I didn't know the desert had one, there's a mountain. It's the mountain of God. Where's the mountain of God? It's out there on the backside of the desert. Have you been places that were really the backside of other places? You find the Lord there. You may meet God there. Well, the adventure continues. Chapter 2 does this thing that goes from, really, it can, in just chapter 2, 3 increments of 40 years are connected. First 40 years, Prince of Egypt. Second 40 years, shepherd in the wilderness, the desert. And the third 40-year period is going to begin with God hearing the cries of his people, calling Moses. I hope you guys all realize that God has a plan for your life. He's involved in your life, wants to use you. I hope that what you've heard today speaks to your heart.
Hey, thanks for listening. We pray that the Word of God will speak to your heart as you meditate on it. If we can help you grow, or if you have any questions, you can visit us at our website at ccbangor.org. Give us a phone call at area code 207-991-9555, or you can shoot us an email at office@ccbangor.org. On behalf of Pastor Ken and all of us here at Calvary Chapel Central Maine, we wish you grace and peace.